The Buddha's Lifespan and the Story of the Physician. The story of the physician is found in Chapter 16 of Kumarajiva's Lotus Sutra. In historical terms, it probably does not represent a primary stage in the sutra's compilation. But once the complete work had come into existence and was translated into Chinese, it came to be considered as the most important chapter of all. It is still used liturgically today, along with Chapter 2, in a manner representative of the sutra as a whole. It certainly does bring to a climax the message of the sutra by relating it directly to the person of the Buddha himself. It raises questions about the nature of the Buddha relevant to many discussions of Mahayana Buddhism, and at the same time it contains, in the short space of under 2 pages, no less than 10 occurrences of the term Skilful Means. Before coming to the story itself, some attention must be paid to the opening portion of the text, which the story then illustrates, and indeed, first of all, to the title of the chapter. The title is perhaps best to be translated as The Tathagata's Lifespan, although length of the life of the Tathagata is also adequate and holds it more literally close to the Sanskrit. It is very important to notice this precise formulation as well as some others in the body of the text, because it is largely on the basis of this chapter that the Lotus Sutra is sometimes represented as replacing the human Buddha with an eternal, transcendent Buddha, who is equivalent in his own being to the God of the main theistic religions. Such an interpretation is not accurate. The whole purport of this chapter, as will become clear in the details which follow, is to argue that the direct demonstrations of the attainment of enlightenment and of nirvana to be seen in the life of the Buddha Sakyamuni, that is, the historical Buddha, are as much to be understood in terms of the concept of skillful means as his teaching about the Four Noble Truths and nirvana. By contrast to the idea that the hero of this tale attained enlightenment after a certain number of years in a historical life, it is said that he had already attained true Buddhahood an incredibly long time previously, is to deflate the fixed idea that it took a small number of years. In other words, the argument is conceived on an entirely dialectical basis. To think that the text here is gratuitously advancing the conception of an eternal Buddha on the lines of Western theism in a manner which would run contrary to the whole trend of Buddhism in general, both before and after the appearance of this text, would be to misconstrue it entirely. The term, sometimes translated as eternal or infinite, means, in fact, immeasurable, and it is crucial to notice the difference. Immeasurable means exactly that one would not in practice be able to measure it. For Maitreya and the others assembled are asked whether, supposing vast quantities of worlds were crushed into atoms, and then each atom were carried away from the west to east one by one, they would be able to calculate the number of worlds so created. Of course, they would not be able to. And likewise, the length of time which has passed since the Tathagata attained supreme perfect enlightenment is so long that it cannot be calculated. The same, however, is true for all Buddha Tathagatas, it must be presumed, for this phrase, implying the plural reality of many such, is used in this very same chapter. The argument of the chapter as a whole arises out of a fantastic event described in the preceding one, Chapter 15. While numerous bodhisattvas are promising that they will protect, read, recite, and copy the Lotus Sutra after the passing away of the Buddha, the latter, to their great astonishment, says that there is really no need for them to be concerned. Why? Because there already are innumerable bodhisattvas ready to do it. These countless bodhisattvas then appear from out of the earth and establish themselves in a marvelous tableau. Not surprisingly, this gives rise to considerable perplexity, and the Buddha assures Maitreya and the original assembly that all of these new arrivals were converted to Buddhism after the Buddha's own enlightenment. Even so, it does not seem possible that so many were converted in the mere 40 years which have elapsed since the Buddha was enlightened. Maitreya and the disciples say that it is as if a young man of 25 were to claim numerous old men as his sons, while the latter recognized him as their father. Since such a thing seems inconceivable, they beg the Buddha to explain, and it is this explanation which is given in Chapter 16 on the Tathagata's lifespan. The preparation for what is about to be said is very similar to that in Chapter 2. The disciples are in a state of perplexity, and they must be prepared to receive what will be said with belief and discernment. 3 times the Buddha enjoins the disciples to receive his sincerely true word. 3 times they promise to listen with belief and discernment. The occasion is solemn. The Buddha then explains that although he is usually thought of as coming from the Sakya clan and renouncing his palace life, taking up a place of meditation not far from the city of Gaya, and there attaining to enlightenment, the reality is that innumerable world systems have come to be and passed away since he originally became a Buddha. Ever since an inconceivably long time ago, he has been constantly teaching, both in this world and in innumerable others. This marvelously different reality is termed, quote, the Tathagata's power of mysterious supernatural pervasion, close quote. But how, we may ask, is it linked with skillful means? The answer to this is that, although the term supernatural or divine is thereafter somewhat neglected, the whole matter of deflating the historical view of the Buddha's life is explained further in terms of skillful means. It is as skillful means that various other Buddhas, such as the Buddha Burning Light or Daipamkara, are differentiated and described as entering nirvana. The various details are framed in accordance with the capacities of those who are to be saved. And, quote, again, by various skillful means, I proclaim the wonderful Dharma, which is able to bring joy to the hearts of all the living. The matter is then related to the historical lifespan of the Buddha, for, seeing that all living beings take pleasure in lesser teachings, and that their virtue is slight while their vileness weighs heavy, to these I declare that I left home in my youth and attained supreme perfect enlightenment. But I have really been like this ever since I became a Buddha. I make this proclamation only as skillful means to teach living beings and get them to enter the Buddha way. In this way, the understanding of Buddhist teachings in terms of skillful means, which has already been more or less systematically advanced throughout the sutra, is here applied to the Buddha's own life story. It is not surprising that this is applied to the end of the Buddha's life as well as to its opening. And so we read, although it is at this time not a real extinction, nevertheless I announce my impending extinction. It is by this skillful means that the Tathagata teaches and transforms the living. If the teaching of the Buddha's enlightenment is conceived and put forward to display the possibility of not being mentally entangled in trifles, the demonstration of his extinction, contrived though it is similarly necessary to prevent people from becoming complacent as a result of the Buddha's presence. In other words, this too is dialectically conceived to take account of the psychological trends of living beings. Thus, the Tathagata is said to teach by skillful means that the appearance of Buddhas in the world is very rare. This is a widespread idea in Buddhist writings, but it takes on particular strength here because it is conceived in terms of skillful means. Skillful means is the technical term which defines any particular piece of Buddhist teaching as being contrived in accordance with the dispositions of those who are to hear it. And to return to the Buddha's nirvana, that is why the Tathagata, though he does not really become extinct, announces his extinction. In this way, therefore, both the 2 key points in the life of the Buddha, His enlightenment and his nirvana are given out as skillful means in accordance with the needs of the living for their deliverance. This is certainly the main thrust of the exposition when it is stated straightforwardly. It is this same point which is conveyed in the teaching that the length of the Tathagata's life is of unimaginable and indefinite length. Let it be observed once again that it is not a question of there being no beginning at all to the Buddha's career as a Buddha, and neither is there any suggestion that the ultimate resolution is anything other than a genuine nirvana or extinction. It is in the context of the Buddha's teaching in many diverse ways that we read, "Thus it is that since I became a Buddha in the very far distant past, my lifetime continues to persist without extinction through immeasurable asamkhaya kalpas. The lifetime which I attained originally by practicing the Bodhisattva way is even now not yet finished, and will still be twice what it was so far." This dramatization of the immense length of a Bodhisattva's and a Buddha's career is in effect being used as a narrative argument about the nature of the concepts of enlightenment and nirvana. The fundamental conception of the Buddha's teaching activity here moves between the same two poles which characterized it in the earlier chapters. On the one hand, the dispositions of the living are varied and not altogether praiseworthy, and hence the Buddha teaches in a variety of ways, with karmic reasonings, parables, and diverse terminology. At the same time, the Tathagata knows and sees the character of the triple world as it really is. No birth and death, no going away, no coming forth, no being in the world, and no extinction, no reality, and no falsehood, no being thus, and no being otherwise. Unlike the view of the triple world held within the triple world itself, the Tathagata clearly sees such things as these without mistake. To claim that something like monotheism is here asserted would be to maintain a view worse than those which the triple world normally maintains about itself. On the contrary, the last quoted sentence keeps the Lotus Sutra firmly in the same area as the perfection of insight literature. It is this understanding of the nature of the world which subverts the standard view of the activity of a Buddha. The standard view is provisionally accepted and encouraged through skillful means. But there comes a time when it is also necessary to indicate the redundancy of the terms in which the teaching is couched. The initial exposition of Chapter 16, considered above, is followed by a story to illustrate the argument. A physician is traveling abroad, and in the meantime his sons drink some poisonous medicines and become delirious. When he returns, he prepares good medicine for them. The ones who take the good medicine recover, but the others have quite lost their senses and refuse to take the good medicine. The father reflects and decides upon a skillful means to make them take it. He warns them that he is very old and approaching death, then leaves for another country, from where he sends a messenger back to report that he has died. The sons are overcome with grief, come to their senses, and take the medicine which he had prepared. Hearing this, the father returns, and they are reunited. Immediately following the story, the question is raised as to whether the physician in this case was guilty of falsehood, and the answer returned is that he was not. Then the Buddha declares, "I also am like this. Since I became a Buddha, infinite, boundless, 100,000 millions of neutas of asamkhaya kalpas ago, for the sake of all the living, I have declared by my power of skillful means that I must enter nirvana. And yet no one can rightly say that I have perpetuated a falsehood." Since the story is not further explained in the prose section, it must be taken as directly illustrating the argument already pursued before. The invented death of the physician puts the nirvana of the Buddha firmly at the level of provisional truth, designed to match the psychological needs of the Buddha's followers. This is supported, it may be observed, by the story context of medicine and healing, a common way of conceiving the nature of Buddhism. The physician is wise and perspicacious, conversant with medical art, and skilled in healing all sorts of diseases. The fundamental condition of the sons is one of health, and it is only the foolish imbibing of poison which makes the antidote necessary. The physician prepares the antidote, which is not otherwise necessary in itself. This is entirely consistent with the diagnosis prescription pattern of the Four Noble Truths, and indicates the pragmatic rather than speculative intention of Buddhism, which has often been noted. This chapter and this story really represent a radicalization of such an understanding of the Buddhist religion, because the Buddha's own entry into nirvana, that is, his death at the end of a lifespan of 80 years, is now treated as being a supreme skillful means to bring about regret and self-examination on the part of the living. The Buddha's influence is thenceforth not to be directly viewed, but is said to be continued only indirectly, in order to maintain the impressive story of his birth, his enlightenment, and his death. The concluding verses twice confirm that the Buddha's nirvana is given out as a skillful means to bring about right attitudes among the living. One of these cases explicitly brings in relic worship under this umbrella. Thus, quote, "By skillful means I manifest nirvana, though really I am not extinct. They all look on me as extinct, and everywhere worship my relics, all cherishing tender emotions as their hearts begin to thirst with hope." Close quote. This is important as bringing in the main focal point of Buddhist devotions from earliest times to the context of the thought of skillful means. It is not only doctrinal concepts which are to be understood as skillful means, but also ritual practice. When the time is ripe and the people are ready in themselves, the Buddha is said to reveal himself again, and here, at last, quite ambiguously, quote, "And then I tell all living beings that I am always present here without extinction. I use my power of skillful means to manifest both extinction and non-extinction." Close quote. The observer cannot idly observe that the Buddha is extinct or not. The pragmatic, soteriological criterion for every form of Buddhist teaching finds clear expression in the closing verses of the chapter. Quote, "I always know all living beings, whether they practice the way or do not practice it. In accordance with what is required for their salvation, I proclaim for their sakes a variety of teachings. I am always considering in my own mind what I can do to bring the living beings to enter the unsurpassed way and speedily accomplish their Buddhahood." Close quote. From all that has been said above, we may conclude that the Mahayana articulation of Buddhism as a working religion along these lines is altogether controlled by the concept of skillful means. Again, that last verse, quote, "I always know all living beings, whether they practice the way or do not practice it. In accordance with what is required for their salvation, I proclaim for their sakes a variety of teachings. I am always considering in my own mind, what can I do to bring the living beings to enter the unsurpassed way and speedily accomplish their Buddhahood?"